Hello everyone, welcome to DPA Open Mic episode 107. So the title for today is Unusually Pro-West New Beginning for Syria. No, I find very offending that he keep touching the female and he tried to kiss the female reporter. Like he smell her on the neck or something. It's like, come on man,
she smells really nice.
You're not even supposed to touch them at all. Like she shouldn't be, carrying you. That's haram,
I really can't imagine her sticking around.
Yeah. You got to check it before you buy, man. That's what he was doing.
So I want to do the meme. Ew, bro. It's haram, bros. Ew.
I can't imagine her sticking around, though. She just keeps getting caught up in these staged kind of reports, and it just completely destroys her credibility. CNN's just got to get rid of her. Well, I realize
CNN's already gone. Surely, I mean, surely the only money they get is from the CIA. Like CNN at this stage, CIA is probably paying for their lights to stay on.
Okay, fair enough.
Probably like 3 people.
Hey, I'm being serious too. Is Syrian girl okay? I haven't seen her. Is she okay?
She went through the whole series of the emotions, from shock, to anger. Now she's acceptance. Now she's in acceptance now.
If you're out there, Syrian girl, I'm here for you if you need a shoulder to cry on.
I saw something on X from her, and I think she's very disappointed. She's really disappointed in the whole situation, which I can understand.
No, but yeah, and also to the point about because I understand that sort of there's a lot of mixed feelings on what's going on amongst the Arabs themselves, and sometimes I think that there's even like a certain level of grief, of complete distraught towards like the way they've been battered so severely these last decades that there's a certain point in which it's like, oh fuck it, I'll just cope with it, imagining that it's a good scenario somehow. And I can understand that sentiment, but like beyond all the speculations one can make about the how the situation is going to evolve in the future, it can be a hopeful situation, sure, but that doesn't take away of the catastrophe that is unfolding. And that's kind of my reproach to a huge chunk of sort of Arab commentators and people that have spoken on the subject, and there's a certain level of optimism that to me is just sort of total hopelessness and cynicism. It's just the impression I get.
Well, there's a really interesting irony, and that is, if Israel can offend the Muslim Arab world so much that they unite and stop attacking and killing each other, then that will be the greatest gift to the Muslim Arab people that has ever been given to them. And they will owe the Jews for that, right? So, this is the irony of the whole situation.
It happened once, 1947.
Yeah, but I think that's why I think that's why Galloway is so heartbroken, right? Because he truly believed that would happen. Because you'd hear him talking about how the Arabs were gonna, connect from the Mediterranean to the Gulf and blah blah blah, and that simply hasn't happened. And to your point earlier, I just don't see where it would, right? I think Palestine is done for.
If the culture of the Muslim world in the Middle East changed so that they could stop fighting each other, guess what? They'd probably get along with Israel. Just putting it out there, this current situation in Gaza, as ugly as it is, right? It didn't fall out of the sky. I mean, October 7 did happen. And if we're honest, if October 7 happened to us, to any of us, we wouldn't be very thrilled. It's like,
we'll go to war, man. We will sign up for military.
Yeah,
for sure.
And look at the way we do war, right? We would have flattened the enemy. The way that the West does war. Look what we did to Iraq, and it wasn't even them that did 9/11.
True.
So,
that's true. I think the West will kill even more people than what Israel
Oh,
Israel
yeah.
only like 30,000, 40,000. Like,
Us,
I
the
mean, it's-
Japanese and the Germans, how the Western Anglos do war. We are
It's
absolutely
the same
brutal.
doctrine. It's the same doctrine. They do the same thing, and so that's why Israel uses that argument and says, "Oh, how come they criticize us when we do the same thing that you guys do?" And it's true. Like, they do have a point on that. I think the only difference is probably the level of gloating that they do, which is quite extraordinary. Like, you see some American soldiers gloating about it and stuff, but like the way Israelis do it is pretty on the nose. Like, it's
I
a
think
bit
it's a-
exaggerated.
I think
Well,
it's
you
a
remember
historical
Abu Ghraib?
No, I think
What?
it's a historical thing. It's because Israel have this conflict with the Palestinians or this blood for like decades. For almost, we are slowly moving into 100 years of bad blood. So I think that gloating makes it worse. Like, if you have the American soldiers in Iraq gloating, the people can't feel anything. It's just Americans doing American things. But when the Israeli do it, it's like, this is like, bad blood all over. But I would say again, the number of deaths is much lower than I thought it would be. I'm expecting 100 to 200,000 deaths. Like, we are not even 100,000.
Oh yeah, but
So
that's
Gaza.
but that's probably
It's
the
about 100. It says close to 100. Official was counting was 43, but with many missing and unknown.
No, remember that the counting has been paralyzed since a few months ago because the system of like the institutions that does the counting is offline. Yeah, it's completely demolished. So yeah, the figure is probably close to the 200,000 by now, because there was an estimate of 100,000 also a couple of months ago, and like every day I hear about another massacre, like 50 dead or 100 dead. It's like a daily occurrence. So
That's true. But listen, there's millions of people in Gaza. So if the death toll is less than 100,000, this actually is, whether you like it or not, as ugly as it is, it's not a genocide.
Yeah.
No, but
if
but
the actual object, if it was true
was
that
a
the
bombing of the
Israelis wanted to
hospital.
kill everybody there, right, they
Yeah.
could, right, and they haven't. So as
There's
ugly
this
as
recent
it
bombing of
is,
the hospital, right? Just purely civilian hospital. So there was a bunch of dead, only civilian. That was just 3 weeks ago. So they still keep doing it, right?
yeah, I'm not saying there's no
true.
war
Like, if you
crimes. I'm
follow
just
the
saying
update-
that like a hyperbole about genocide is not. It's not made out
if
of
you-
the facts. And
But if you
like on
follow
this
the
point,
update,
on
if
this
you follow
point,
the update-
Gabriel,
Okay,
one of the
go on.
issues that Israel has with Ireland, right? One of the reasons for this conflict is that Ireland actually made a submission to the ICC for them to change the definition of genocide, right, in the statute, which is a really, really weird thing to ask them to do if you think about it, right? It's like, why do they need to change the definition of genocide if genocide is made out? It's a little bit weird, right? And so I sympathize with the Israelis on that. It's like, that is a bit of a tacit admission that there's not a genocide. Now, that's not to say there aren't war crimes and that Netanyahu, is a good guy. He's absolutely not, in my view. I think Netanyahu's done more damage to Israel than anyone could ever have imagined. And by the way, Netanyahu is not Semitic. His father is Polish, right?
Yeah.
He changed
So
his
it's a
name to
Polish problem.
Netanyahu. Right. Well, no, I'm
So
just
it's a
saying,
Polish-
it's like all this hyperbole about anti-Semitism from Netanyahu. The dude's not Semitic.
I haven't forgotten.
Palestinians and the Arabs are actually Semitic people. Netanyahu is not a Semitic person by ethnicity.
I haven't forgotten.
Yeah.
For those people who have not watched DPA Open Mic from the early days, Toby's, when he first come out, he was ranting about Poland. So he had a thing against Polish people. So.
I do not have a thing against Polish people.
No, and one more thing. The problem. Just now we were talking about the genocide thing, right? My main thing against the genocide claim about the Israeli conducting some genocide is that because the scale is so small, yes, they flattened the cities, but the number of deaths is not really at the scale of genocide, it actually makes the real genocide like it's an insult to the real genocides that is currently happening around the world or in the past. Like if you look at the Khmer Rouge genocide, there is a freaking real genocide. You know, you
Which genocide? Sorry.
Cambodia.
Khmer Rouge in Cambodia.
Oh yeah.
The
Khmer
Cambodian
Rouge.
genocide, the Sudan one. You know, you talk about the Rwanda. You know, those are real genocides. When you say the Israeli is conducting genocide, you are insulting the real genocides. That's the problem
No,
I have with
I understand your point.
About the scale.
Especially,
It's not about the scale. It's in definition. There's an intention to execute everyone. That's what definition it says.
But they didn't.
What they did.
They
No,
allowed
no,
food
no.
in.
They are demanded civilians to move out. So that demand actually shows that it's not their intention. It's just who didn't move out, he didn't listen. They're collateral, right? That's the real legal excuse for them not to be a genocide.
Yeah.
But still could be determined as ethnic cleansing, which is not the
Yes.
smaller.
Oh yeah, there's war crimes there for sure, right?
War
But there's
crimes.
just
Okay.
but I agree with Wyatt. It cheapens the word. It's like it's like everyone's a racist, everyone's doing genocide. And then it doesn't mean anything anymore.
You got all Nazis and Hitler.
cheapening the concept of genocide is pretty easy, because the concept of genocide itself is just a placeholder for geopolitical manipulations. I mean, like, you have all the
Pretty much.
crimes against humanity in the book, and then you have, apart from that, this concept of genocide that was really diplomatic negotiations between major powers after the Second World War, so as to like keep some sort of semblance of humanity for the genocidal powers that were the major powers that negotiated the world order after the Second World War. And it was just a convenient thing for them to state, so that they could like put something worse than what they were doing, so that they could like whitewash what they were doing, what the British Empire was doing, what the the Belgian kingdom had done. Like, it was a whole deal of political negotiation, and it wasn't for humanitarian purposes at all. But to Wyatt's point about the proportion of genocide, like, I understand where you're coming from Asia. Like, you see what the Americans did in the Korean War, what the Japanese did during the Second World War, the Cambodian, the Laos, the Vietnam shit, and
What the British did in Tasmania.
you haven't
Just
even lost.
shout out to the British, man. The British killed every single Aboriginal person in Tasmania, right? That was
Yeah,
a
fucking
complete
insane
and
shit.
total
And
genocide.
that's my point about
So,
genocide. That it's like a form of a diplomatic solution for their own crimes. And
okay.
but I wanted to talk about a thing of proportion. So, like, say you have Korea lost millions of people in the war, but they lost what, like a 10% of their population. So maybe you don't consider it. But if I get to a village, like a tribe that is isolated, has their own particular culture, and I wipe them out from the face of the earth, maybe they were just, I don't know, 2,000 people. I just killed 2,000 people. Like, it's not a genocide, but I wiped out an entire bloodline and an entire culture from the face of the earth, and that's a genocide. You see,
Yes.
like in the literal sense of the concept, beyond like the legal shenanigans that the concept
Yes.
was invented by him.
I agree. This is the problem now with
Just to finish real quick, the thing of what the Israelis are doing beyond the official body count, which is super underestimation by all accounts, the simple level of destruction, first the stated purposes, and then the complete destruction of all life-sustaining infrastructure. It's just like incompatible with the survival of that people. That's all I'm saying about like the genocide.
So I want to add on to what Gabriel was saying. So the main problem with I hope that we don't dwell in this black hole for too long, but the problem with the genocide thing is a matter of the definition. If you think of it in the English sense, the English word of the genocide is what I'm saying. But if you look at the UN definition, that is not the English definition. That is the UN legal definition, which means to cover a lot of stuff. And I did make a joke about it. But months ago. No, you can literally apply it to any single power in the world. Every single war in the world, everyone is genocidal because it's too wide. People, I see in the live chat, people is pasting, copy and pasting what is the definition in the UN. You cannot use that definition. It's not real. Like in Vietnam, like the Americans wipe out the entire village. My Lai, the My Lai massacre. Everyone died in the village. They killed off everyone. But that is still a massacre. It's still not even a genocide. Genocide is literally you're trying to kill every single person you see. Everything that moves, you kill it. For no reasons, that's genocide. Like what happened in Cambodia, there's literally they're killing people for no reasons. Like they just keep killing. So Israel is not at that level yet. But I did also, of course, I did mention to many open mics before I say that if the hatred continues to grow to one point, we will see genocide, where the Israelis just see all Arabs as evil and then decide to kill every single Arab that they see is moving, which is, of course, I think it's very hard to reach there. But yeah, coping.
Yes, you guys hear me? Okay, excellent. I want to also move away from this genocide thing because Wyatt accurately pointed out that it is a black hole. It's not like one cannot talk about it, but one should be aware that it is indeed arbitrary, like he said about definitions, right? And so it's a matter of interpretation. So why do we end up in many black holes? Well, that's because many black holes, they are based on, it's self-referential on subjective matters. So it's a matter of interpretation versus interpretation, and then there is no objective reference point, and then it goes around in circles. To kind of help us get out of the black hole facet of this all, I want to touch on 3 points here, and it's kind of so do interrupt me if I do stop, but I will also have a lot of gratitude if I can be given a little latitude on this one. So the 3 things I want to touch on is one, last week I mentioned one possible outcome of the Druze shifting allegiance, and that would drastically increase the chances of Israeli annexation. Now that we are seeing that happening, I would on that point be presenting another possibility that may occur. The second point I want to touch on is the likely demise of Hezbollah and the dangers of that. Are the dangers of Hezbollah being not destroyed, but actually just losing dominance over Lebanon? That's really it. Not being destroyed. That's what I mean about demise. And the final point is one that I kind of was hoping would touch on the previous open mic, and there was someone in the live chat who kind of pointed it out, and I think it might be worthwhile getting into, and that is the implications of the Russians losing their assets in Syria, when more specifically to their ambitions in the Red Sea as well as in the Sahel region going through Libya. Because as far as I've understood it, in the worst case scenario, they'll simply reshift over to Libya and their ambitions in the Red Sea can still be achieved. But do they have the port facilities and so forth? So getting on the 3 points, and I'm going to try to be quick and concise on this. The reason I said that the Druze were going to be the thing that defines Syria is because when we're talking about jihadis, right, these are the people we need to be referring to vis-a-vis the Druze, because that is their threat. And the jihadis, many jihadis in the Sunni Islam, they would consider the Druze even worse than Jews. And so referring to Islamic scriptures here, like if you're a blasphemer or apostate, you get the death penalty. But what is even worse than that, and even worse than an infidel, is someone who's trying to reform Islam. It's called bid'ah. Islam points it out in the scriptures. It's a declaration of war against it. And so the Druze, this is why you see the Sunni Shia divide, by the way. The Shia are considered reformist by the Sunnis. And so the Druze, being a Shia branch, the Ismaili more precisely, they are of course a natural target for the Sunni jihadis. But they are even considered worse because they have elements of reincarnation in it, their religion among others. And that puts them under the category, according to many of the Sunni jihadis, that puts them under the category of polytheists or pagans, which are in the Islamic hierarchy considered like the worst of the worst. So viewing it, it's not so hard to imagine why the Druze would choose to switch their allegiance in that regard. And that is also why I want to be reiterating this notion that the settlements it's a settlement expedition. It's sort of like the notion that went around early in the Ukraine war and prior, that China had invasion plans of Russia in order to settle it. But even on a cursory glance of China's demographic would make it patently absurd. And the same thing here, you can see that Israel is not able to even consolidate the West Bank. And for contrast, if you're looking on a 50-year project here of settlement, right? For contrast, the Moroccans in West Sahara, the Israelis are 1/5. The settlers are 1/5 of the West Bank, whereas in the Western Sahara there are 5 times as many settlers as there are Sahrawis. Right, that's a successful demographic domination of the region through settlement, and so that's why, So, on the possible outcome that we might see ahead, because there's a very sizable Druze community in Sweda. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's written sort of SWE, whatever. Well, for all the reasons I just mentioned, they may very well want to just join their Druze brethren, because they've often seen the divide as somewhat artificial anyways. This could present a very problematic headache for Israel, because in between Sweda and the Israeli-held areas for the time being, the Golan more specifically, you have the city of Daraa, which is mostly a Sunni Muslim. Now, due to their proximity with the other Druze, you shouldn't be assuming that these Sunni Muslims are going to be like the others that the Druze have had to contend with, generally speaking. But this is a problem for Israel, because, referring back to the settlement thing, there's a reason this conflict isn't as territorial as people think. It's the people and the ideas that really matter. And so they don't want more Sunni Muslims. So that's why it will be interesting to see what happens there. Now, on the last 2 points, and I promise they will be much, much quicker. The likely demise of Hezbollah is, I'm pretty sure everyone can see, but there is a danger there, and that is Lebanon breaking out into another civil war. I wondered if that was something we would be getting into and trying to predict on. And then on the third one, and I think Vaun is the one who probably wants to answer the last one. This is the question for the whole panel. The implications of the Russians losing their assets in Syria, and what would that mean, for example, to their ambitions in the Sahel? And thank you for letting me rant on.
Well, I'll just go on the third one. I don't really think Russia lost any assets. I mean, they may have lost some areas where they had some fobs, but it's pretty clear that they've been allowed to fall back and reconsolidate it. Tartus and Khamenei, they're obviously going to stay there. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen, but they might have got the best deal out of this whole civil war, because they get to keep an air base, they get to keep a port. It's a hub between Africa and Russia and Iran and Russia and whoever they want to deal with. And all they got to do is figure out who's in charge of that area, make sure he gets 10% of the cut. And nobody's going to bother the Russians. In fact, the Russians are smart. They'll probably consolidate, maybe set up a little Russian safe zone. Because I'm sure there's still Syrian military people that are in the Navy that can operate those ships that are being protected by the Russians. And there's probably some Syrian Air Force guys left and stuff still on the base. So, I mean, they kind of carved out a little niche. They don't have any responsibilities other than themselves now. And make sure the guy in charge of the area gets a paycheck, and I bet you nobody bothers them. And then they got Tartus, the air base. They don't. I mean, it's kind of a good deal for them. Israel's going to have to figure out what it wants to do with this little land grab and whatever the hell they think they're going to do, and all the friends they made along the way. The U.S., what are they going to do with all their buddies and friends when they try to divide it up? I mean, everybody else is going to basically try to divide this up and get some kind of action or control something, whereas Russia can basically just sit there and pay somebody rent and have zero responsibility. It's just an access point between their country and Africa. And then when you think about what they're going to be pulling in and out of Africa, I'm pretty sure that whatever the price is, they can not be undersold. They'll always have those bases. Plus, if you're the HTS or whoever, why not let them stay? Because that's always an out. If the Americans or the Israelis or the Turks start giving you headaches, you can always go talk to your Russian friends. So, I mean, the Chinese should try to see if they can get in there and grab a little airport or something, set up shop. I mean, it seems like that's what everybody else is doing. But yeah, I don't think it's going to hurt Russia at all. I mean, it might be embarrassing temporarily, but I think once they consolidate those two areas, they'll probably have a pretty nice little setup compared to what everybody else will be trying to deal with. I think it's Nunya or...
To answer those questions, I think on the first one, with respect to Hezbollah as well as Hamas, for that matter. Bradley and I were talking about this the other day. I think with the defeat of the Assad regime, and that breaks the axis of resistance along that corridor, it's going to make it extremely hard to, fund and arm both of these groups. And I think it's just a matter of time. And we can debate whether or not there's a genocide going on or whatever, but I would suspect that sometime over the next few years, you're definitely going to see an ethnic cleansing. And the Israelis are going to push the remaining Palestinians into Egypt and then into Jordan as well for those in the West Bank, and that'll be the end of it. And nobody's going to stop them. With respect to the Russian base, I'd imagine that this was all pre-discussed and pre-planned prior. So between the Americans, the Turks, the Israelis, and the Russians. So I don't think any of this was really a shock to the Russians. So I think that they probably had worked out some sort of agreement with Erdogan on the base. But with that said, whether or not they stay there long term, I think the Russians are probably assessing that right now. So while they haven't confirmed, I don't think they've confirmed that they're staying there or pulling out. I'm guessing that they're probably assessing that because, on the one hand, you got to kind of weigh the cost benefit of having this base in Syria for a regime that you're no longer propping up versus being at the whim of a bunch of head choppers in Erdogan, right? So maybe Russia just pulls out. I think they'll make that determination in the coming months. Go ahead, Toby.
Yeah, okay, so we're moving on to talk about Turkey. That's the elephant in the room here. And by elephant, I mean to stress the size of Turkey. Turkey just got a lot bigger. Erdogan says he wants to keep a whole bunch of Syrian cities, including Aleppo, which is a very large city. I think it's the second biggest city after Damascus in Syria. Now, the thing about Turkey is, there's a couple of things, right? Firstly, Russia's trade with Turkey, Russia's economic trade with Turkey is vastly bigger than their trade with Syria. So in geopolitical terms, Russia playing nice with Turkey is way, way, way more important economically for Russia than playing nice with, the Syrian regime. And so there's clearly been a deal done. That goes two ways. Turkey can't really afford to have bad relations with Russia either. There's lots of economic ties between those two nations, and they really can't afford to have bad relations, right? The thing is, though, there's a lot of Kurds in Turkey. There's even more territory that is traditionally Kurdish in Turkey, and the Kurds have a population base in Iran, they have a population base in Iraq. So there's foreign nations that can support a Kurdish insurrection in Turkey. So Turkey has to be really careful, right? They're getting very big, which isn't going to thrill anybody in the region. It's going to make everybody nervous. They've got a massive potential civil war going on with the Kurds that can be fueled and supported by both Russia and Iran, and potentially Iraq as well. So there's a lot of incentive for the Turks to play nice with Iran and Russia. So Turkey's going to have to be very careful. Also, I'm not sure how healthy the Turkish economy is, and occupying a hostile Syria would be a very expensive undertaking. So, I'm curious to see how everybody reacts to a resurgent Turkey, right? But I think that also Russia will work with them and play nice with Turkey. But I wonder what Israel make of Turkey as well, because a resurgent Turkey, even now with the partitioning of Syria, you can tell there's friction there. So I don't know how long they're going to play nice with each other. But that's an open question.
I mean, think about that air base and that port. And like you're saying, the relationships that have to be maintained. It's a perfect smuggling point between Europe and Africa. So it's not like people can't be made happy and whole and satisfied to ensure the deals are kept and the promises are made and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure that little area is going to be quite a profitable gem. not just legally. I'm just saying. I mean, Turkey, like you said, Turkey's broke. They need money, so there's ways to make them happy.
So we're going to pivot to Ukraine at all?
I want to do one thing that Nunya was saying, if I may, before we go over to Ukraine. You said that Palestine, or whatever you want to call it, Hamas in particular, maybe. Who is typing?
Me, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question because you seem to be, Nunya, you seem to be very convinced that Hamas is toast. That might be begging an interesting question at the same time because, they have been taking a tremendous beating, but why have they been so much more resilient than, say, Hezbollah? Because Hezbollah is weakened, arguably, but they're not nearly as crushed as, one would think. They're certainly not completely defeated. They're much larger than Hamas, and their territory is not nearly as compromised, and so forth. They have, like Hamas, also been suffering quite a lot of assassinations of their senior staff on the military wing as well as their top political leadership. But it's been the same for Hamas. It's a little bit less on the political side. Khaled Mashal and some of those are still wandering around, and they are safe. So I kind of suspect that's one of the reasons they're somewhat more safe from getting taken out by Israel than the leaders of Hezbollah. So they're perhaps they have less incentives though to then agree to a ceasefire. But more to the point you said, they're toast because of I gotten the impression that those jihadis also are taking power, HTS. They have been, at least outwardly, but what can you believe really? They seem to be very pro-Palestine, like they have the flags and stuff like that. They share their Sunni Muslims, unlike the Shia Islam of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So, would they be completely cut off? I'm not so sure about that. Because the HTS is very unlikely. I can't see them really being on friendly terms with Israel. And so, yeah.
Well, Golani, however you pronounce his name, he's just a CIA asset, right? So, anything that I've heard the guy say is, hey, we're not gonna. He actually said that they weren't gonna fight with Israel. He came out and said that the other day. So I think that, like I said, he's been inserted there for a reason. And the reason I think both Hamas and Hezbollah, they're not long for this world is, like I said, the axis of resistance is broken now. So it'll be very difficult to supply them. But more importantly, geopolitically, the players in the region determined that Assad had to go, right? So, this was a Turkish decision. This was an American decision. This was a Russian decision. This was an Israeli decision. Like anybody who had a seat at that table, they all determined that moving forward, it'll be without Assad. So unless they didn't consider what the ramifications of that would be, I have to believe that they have made the decision that Project Palestine is something that is a 20th century thing, and moving forward. As Toby mentioned earlier, and I mentioned this to Bradley the other day too, when, he and I were debating whether or not Iran would continue to support Hamas and stuff. And I said, well, you kind of look at it and you say, if Palestine didn't exist, right? And let's say that they were completely ethnically cleansed, they were pushed out in Egypt and that was done and dusted. If Palestine didn't exist, well, all of a sudden you've got a whole lot fewer problems in that region. And maybe, as Toby said earlier, maybe the Arabs start getting along. Maybe they start getting along with Israel as well. So, it may not necessarily be a bad thing geopolitically for Iran if they don't have this Gaza thing constantly hanging over them. It's terrible for the people there. Because they're just getting slaughtered. But as we said earlier on in the show, I don't see where, there's some great Arab Superman coming to the rescue.
Can I just interject really quickly? I know you guys got your finger up, but I wanted to say this earlier. Nunya, you raised an interesting point. You said before that the Israelis may push out the Palestinians. Well, all the scamps in chat are having a whinge because, like, you know, Toby's supporting Jewish genocide and everything. Look, if I am aware of the definition. If the Israelis do that, right? If they do actually push the Palestinians out of the region, then they are in breach of genocide, right? It's like you don't actually have to kill everybody under the laws of genocide. If they actually push all those people out and eradicate the culture that is native to Gaza, right, that constitutes a genocide. And so this is why I don't see that Israel has that option.
No.
I'm not sure the world will accept that.
No, depends on how you do it. So if, let's say, Israel point the gun and say that if you don't move, we shoot. And that's the way how they push them out of Gaza, that is a genocide, because you are literally killing them to push them out. So if, let's say, you just persuade them to go, or you legally made an agreement and force them out, at most you can call it an ethnic cleansing of a region.
No, that's not the actual definition. Because it's not so much a destruction of the human life. Genocide also incorporates removing a culture from a territory, right? So ethnic cleansing can become genocide under the law if your intention is to remove that culture permanently. And so all the case that would have to be made under the law is that Israel intended to completely remove the Palestinian culture from that territory, right? They wouldn't have to be guilty of killing everybody there. So it doesn't matter how nicely they do it. If they try and sort of like wipe Palestinian culture off the map, they will meet the legal definition of genocide. And so this is what's so problematic with Israel. I don't see an end game that's good for them.
Why is the Palestinian culture?
Well, arguably it goes back to the Philistines, right? It's biblical.
No.
Yeah, like that whole region was.
It's not the same thing. Isn't the same thing?
Arguable. I mean,
yeah, but it's like saying that the Singaporean culture is just Chinese, you know?
Yeah, that's
it's
wrong.
The same. Well, but it's the same thing as saying that the Palestinian culture is just Arab. It's like it's a locality. It has its similarities, its language, cultural, and whatever religious connections, but it has its particular territorial integrity.
So I although I accidentally detracted from something else, but you know, the if you talk about culture, Palestine culture right now is just hating Israel, largely. The whole society is built around moving through checkpoints, living a life under a certain like an open air prison kind of restrictions, and giving up your life to kill the Jews, or to free your
losing
people.
your house.
That is your culture. That is the culture of Palestine right now.
Friendly.
That's what it's become. But there were Palestinians there in 1930 and 1920 and 1910 and 1890 and 1870 and 1700 and 1600 and 1500.
That's my point, man. My point is they developed to the point where the culture, this is their culture now, and you say that eliminating this culture is genocide. That is something is wrong. And genocide is have to kill people to be genocide. I don't believe in like just simply ethnic cleansing. Force moving people from one place to another is called genocide. Yes, legal definition is legal definition, but it is a weapon. Law is just a weapon. You have to put it so wide so that you can attack them in all different angles. If you talk about simply the word, the meaning, it's just, isn't it? It's just killing people, killing a lot of people.
Well, turn it around. What if the Arabs said, okay, from the river to the sea, the Jews have to go. We're not going to kill them all, but they all have to leave Israel, right?
Yeah, it's ethnic but it's not a genocide. It
is. It is. I don't mean by the colloquial definition, but legally it is.
To the black hole.
I bring it up because the chat's bringing it up, and the people on chat have got a point, right?
So that's my point. Legally, yes. UN definition, yes. I already read it many times. I think it's stupid. It is clearly a weapon. The thing is, it's a legal definition. It's not a real human conversational understanding of what it is.
It's a geopolitical tool. And it's a geopolitical tool that's been abused so many times. Like Bosnia was a genocide, and Kosovo was a genocide, and even the Russians committing genocide. So that's why people can then bring it up and say, oh, look, Israel is committing more of this type of genocide than what happened in Kosovo, than what happened in Bosnia, than what happened in what's happening in Ukraine. Like, if you call genocide any single thing you don't like, then this is definitely a genocide.
I want to put an example. For example, legally, how do you consider something as a murder? You have to put in a whole list of ways to kill people. But the thing is, doing certain things in this list doesn't mean it's a murder. You understand what I mean? You can kill someone in many, many different ways. It's still a murder. If I lock you up in a room and don't feed you, you die of hunger, that is still murder. But no, but locking people up in a room is not a murder. You understand what I mean? It's legal definitions are meant to do a specific thing. It's a tool. It's not English. It's not English conversations. When we say murder, people die. That's it. Genocide, a lot of people die indiscriminately. That's genocide. That's it. You don't we lock you up, we don't give you food, so that's genocide. I remove your culture, push out our land, that's genocide. No, that's not. That's a legal weapon, because you have to put in a huge chunk of shit inside it so that you can actually point that person down and punch the law into them. If not, there's no way. Everybody will just escape from all the different angles to avoid getting charged. That's why law and English is two different things. The definition is different. You can't use a legal definition for normal conversation. It clashes. It makes conversation become stupid.
No, yeah, you can have normal conversations about legal language and definitions. I'm sure Toby knows about that.
On this issue, like I find it really dangerous to talk about this, because you get into the trap of talking about just wars, right? And you start talking about clean wars and precision strikes, and this is all bullshit. War is slaughter. War is hatred and the murder and the slaughter of human beings. And anybody that tries to dress it up nicely, they're probably selling weapons, right? I'm very skeptical. I'm very skeptical of trying to sanitize any kind of war, right? And so I kind of agree with Wyatt on this. I don't like having legal discussions about the genocide either, because I think it's
because my
very ingenuous.
That Israel, my concept is not Israel killing not enough people. It's like they kill a lot of people, and they've caused so much suffering. That is not
a lot of children, for goodness sake.
The point is, when the real genocide happened, then people get shocked by what a real genocide looks like. Because we have devalued the word so much. It's just like calling everybody Nazis. No, it's stupid. No, when you meet a real Nazi, your mind will be blown. It's coping.
Yeah, but why? My point about that is that it's been abused beforehand, and so, like, by using the definition that has been created throughout abusing the word for geopolitical purposes, that has made the use of the word valid in that same context. Maybe Kopi wants to say something about that before I continue to the real subject that was right before this.
I didn't want to be destroying the flow of the conversation, but I also don't want to be wandering too far away from where we kind of started, because the reason I asked if the Russians have to, there's so many things changing now in the Middle East that I thought that would be worth addressing. So nobody actually addressed that. They're just opining whether or not the Russians are going to yield, but since things are changing so quickly, and that pertains to one thing that I found a little bit interesting that is pointed out here. And I've heard that elsewhere, namely that this could only happen if there was a tacit agreement between the Russians, the Americans, and the Turks, which I find a bit, maybe not beyond comprehension, but I would like to understand why people believe that. And the reason, because keep in mind, not only do we have this thing in the Ukraine and everything, but all these things can also still happen without there being much of a prior agreement. Like, this could happen as a quick reaction, as a matter of fact. For example, Giuliani, and he could be merely expedient because he's recently entered power, so he needs to be somewhat more tolerant. But then, he has hardliners within his unit, which may switch things. And these hardliners are definitely not going to be yielding to Russia whatsoever, especially if we consider that the HTS is kind of under the Americans, which we already know have an antagonistic relationship with Russia. So, like, a prior deal, I kind of find that actually harder to believe than that who is forgotten to mute here? Nunya, can you please stop tapping while you're on
Not
mute?
me.
It's me.
Ah, damn, Wyatt. Yes, I just wondered how do you anyone could explain a little bit why you think because again, yeah, I get the idea that planning might have been the thing, but as far as I can see it, this could also well happen without planning, and that's why we keep seeing things unfolding in such strange ways. Russian base or the planning part, whoever. I guess Gabriel, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I was with my finger up, but then they were really eager to go back to the genocide people. So, I wanted to go back to sort of the general transnational situation in the Middle East, geopolitical situation in the Middle East, and the issue of like what is the gameplay evolving from now on, and like to the issue of like the resistance and sort of the support for Palestinian cause and the Hezbollah and how Syria breaks that down. I think it's a weird situation. Like, I'm not really clear on like what Iranians' interests are in all. Like, clearly they have interest because they've been giving support to Hezbollah and apparently also to the Palestinian cause, even though like they're directly opposed in sort of the sectarian battle that's going on, and also in like the sources of financial support. Like, I'm not so sure what Iranians are gaining from this whole rebellion support situation. And I've heard a lot of certain Muslim commentators express this idea that like Iran depends on sort of the existence of Israel to validate its position, which I think it's kind of ridiculous, and it has a lot to do with like the Saudi Arabian and Qatari talking points, like
it's actually what I refer to. Just quickly, it's what I refer to on the theological level. That's because it is a theocracy that has its legitimacy on that basis. So that's one of the reasons the argument comes up. Whether valid or not is a different thing. But yeah, just throwing it in.
Well, this might be a bit out of date because, like, Gabriel, the initial reason for the Iranian elite to promote Palestine was domestic political support, right? There's so much sympathy for fellow Muslims, but that we're talking about the situation 30, 40, 50 years ago. The world changes. Iran changes, right? It may be that right now Iranians don't really care. It might be that what the Iranians want now is Netflix and consumable chocolate edibles, right? Like they may no longer care. It may not be worth anything, or not. It may not be worth as much domestically, politically, for the Iranian regime to support Palestine, and especially if the cost of doing it is getting smacked on the snout by the US, right? They might be thinking this isn't worth it. And listen, to answer Coping's other point real quick about like what's Russia doing and what would the deal be made. Remember, Trump's coming into power here, and this is why I wanted to pivot to Ukraine. Trump's a deal maker. If Russia give Europe their pipeline from the South Pars Dome in Qatar all the way through Syria and Turkey and into Europe, if they give them that energy supply, right, maybe the quid pro quo is they get Ukraine. And then everybody gets something and goes home. This smells like Trump to me, because Trump is the deal maker. Trump isn't going to accept a total loss, right? Trump is not going to be the guy that they hang the loss of Ukraine on. He's going to have to point to something and say, this is the best thing ever. It's beautiful. Look at it. It's made of gold. Everybody said it's wonderful. And if he can point to Syria and that gas pipeline, right, and focus on that as the winning thing and what he got out of it, and focus on that, then that's what he gets, and it's a win. And everybody can ignore the fact that they're going to give up Ukraine. So this is why I think that there may be a deal here. And from Russia's point of view as well, they may be like, they may not care as well. They may be perfectly prepared to give up that oil pipeline because they don't care if Europe gets their hydrocarbons from Qatar through that pipeline. There's way more demand for hydrocarbons than there is for supply. And so, you know what? Maybe the Russians have got other places they can sell it. India, China. They've already pivoted to that Central Asian world island market. They may be perfectly prepared to give up that pipeline, allow the Europeans to have their energy supply, and give up on the whole European energy market. If that's the quid pro quo, it would make sense to me. So I kind of smell a deal here, because remember, Trump said he could end this war straight away. So there's got to be some play here, right? There's got to be a strategy. Russia's got to come out looking like they won. Trump's got to come out looking like he won. If Trump gets Syria and the pipeline, and Russia get Ukraine, everybody wins. Except Assad and Ukraine, and nobody cares about them anyway, so everyone wins. Everyone that matters.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to go at before the interruption is about what's Iran's role in all of this is, because Iran is a major player in the Middle East, and it's not only a major player in the Middle East, but it's also the third angle of the triangle of the Eurasian landmass, the continental power, so to speak. And so that's what I was pointing at towards what is Iran's, because on one side you have this sort of domestic demagoguery about supporting the Arabs and the Muslims and so on and so forth. But then the other possibility is that they're actually under a severe threat, which they have been since way back, and their support for these rebellious groups and all is basically a perimeter, a defense perimeter. It's like a front line away from their actual borders, which is what concerns them. Now that's just debatable, because they kind of got Afghanistan and Iraq screwed over, but Hezbollah did a really good job in defending Lebanon. And why would they want to do that? Why would they want to defend Lebanon against the invasion of Israel? And why would they want to preserve the Palestinian state instead of retracting all its people from there and using them as foot soldiers for defense in a consolidated location? And I get the impression that there's actually a strategic value in having a buffer zone of unruly defensive positions in their way, and having a sort of strategic pinning down of the Israeli aircraft carrier, unsinkable aircraft carrier going on. And so I don't think Hezbollah is actually really harmed by this breaking down of the land bridge, because if supposing that Russia keeps its bases in the Mediterranean and Russia is actually allied with Iran, and Russia is supporting Iran militarily, then they could just cut the middleman and do it without Syria and pass it from the Mediterranean, and support Hezbollah through the Mediterranean, through the Russian bases. That's a possibility. But about the deal that you're pointing out, Toby, that makes a shit ton of sense. I think it would be interesting to discuss what the resistance would be to that deal. What would be the parties interested in subverting or destroying that deal? So whoever wants to go on with that or the previous point.
Nunya has been holding his finger up forever. We have a super chat, and Shadowi and Brew have not been speaking since we went on our own little spiel here for a long time. So I think we should, I suggest we give it to Nunya. Chat? We address the super chat, and then we let Brew and Shadowi have the word.
Sure.
Do you think the Syria will be more stable along ethnic borders?
Well, just to finish up on Iran, I think it goes back to our chat about 20 minutes ago. We were talking about the Arab states and how the absence of a Palestine issue kind of opens up a lot more doors for normalization. And, I think it's become clear that, any sort of resistance, there's never been any great Arab resistance, as Toby said at the very beginning. And that's becoming ever more clear now. So when I think of Iran, in particular, they've got everything going for them right now. I mean, they just joined the BRICS. They're signing trade deals all over the place. They just discovered a huge lithium mine like a year or two ago that needs to be developed. They've got lots of things going for them right now. And as long as they stay on that sort of BRICS path and building other relationships with other countries as this multipolar world kind of, blooms. I think they'll be fine. And I think that could be said around about a lot of countries in the region. I'm kind of getting the sense now that this whole Palestine thing was all just smoke and mirrors. It was a 20th century fight that nobody in the 21st century seems to want to fight it, aside from the Palestinians and maybe a couple Houthis somewhere. Whoever wants to go next.
Do you want to address the super chat and then pass the words to the next one who wants to address it? I'd like to address the super chat.
I don't know enough about the Ottoman borders back in World War I to confidently talk to this one, so I'll leave it to somebody else.
Yeah, I'd say that the stability of Syria depends more on like where its borders are, like on what is the power play of major powers tugging on it. That's sort of my assessment of that situation.
I think that's a really interesting question, but off the top of my head, I couldn't give a good answer. I'd have to go do some reading or something. It's a good question, though. It's an interesting question.
I can respond. If you go by ethnic border, yes, it might work for now because the ethnic makeup is like this now. But when the population expands and they needed more land, then they will do military expansion. That's it. And then some countries, some borders, some countries will never work because they don't have the resources to survive. Yeah. So
one thing about the ethnic divisions of borders and all that bullshit is that a great part of like the geopolitical manipulations that were devised before and during the First World War to like destroy major powers and consolidate British Empire dominion was exactly to incentivize and spark flames of dissent and division between ethnicities and religion. Because like any power, every power in all ages was always composed of disparate communities joining together for their mutual benefit. And a strong part of the destruction of the world that happened during the 20th century was precisely a British plan to engineer divisions between these powers by creating these ethnic, religious, and national divisions, which were completely artificial. Like they've always been working together. This division between ethnicities is ridiculous. Go on.
Can I please address the super chat first before we leave it? Because I want to give a lot of latitude for Shadowi and Bruce so they can catch up a little bit. The super chat, I agree very much with Toby. The question is really good, basically, it's I think a lot of the good points have already been addressed. But if I want to throw one thing in there, yeah, I mean, in the long run it could, but it's for reasons that Wyatt pointed out. You need to have, and also Gabriel, you need to kind of have something that is geographically viable, because I mean, these are, first of all, many of them are going to be landlocked. And which is unlike Israel, right? And also unlike Israel, they don't much of them don't have a lot of the infrastructure prior that makes it possible for them to kind of manage with, such a confinement. Israel is kind of an unusual. It's so like there aren't many Singapores in the world. There aren't many Israels in the world. So it's a pretty steep climb for these any ethnic federation within Syria to be. The only ones who would have a really good outcome here will be the Alawites, the ones who were from former Assad, and that's because of their location by the coast and their concentration, and also because they're already present with Russian assets, the ones being in Tarsus and Latakia. So I would say in the long run, maybe it could be, but it depends on a lot of variables, which I think will be worth getting on. I believe Shadowi was the one who came on first, and then Brew, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't mind. Shadowi can go first.
Yes,
all right,
You can duel and then decide.
even when you divide the country with ethnic line, you always have issue about war between this ethnicity, between the tribe, because just of greed. And don't forget, there is oil, there is water, there is a good land for farming. There is always a reason to wage war. So whatever border you decide to put in place, so war is going to happen a few years after that. It's always the case because human is always greedy. But about the whole situation in Syria, I think that every major player that had a plan in Iran, in Syria, and a lot of this plan has been destroyed by what happened a few weeks ago. Because I'm pretty sure that even the Turkish didn't think that the Bashar al-Assad army was going to be destroyed so quickly, and I'm sure they were very surprised by that. And of course, Turkey for now is winning against, and Iran is losing. Russia is maybe on the losing side today, but in 2 weeks, who could say what's going to happen? For me, trying to make plan and to try to understand what's the strategy and so on, it's very strange because the situation is just too much chaotic today. And then it's Boo, your turn.
Basically, I just wanted to say I think the Kurds are probably going to lose against Turkey. Like, I don't think Trump's going to backstab Erdogan or anything when he comes into power. I don't know much about the relationship between Erdogan and Trump. I don't know if they get along or whatever. But I think Turkey's going to take most of Syria. That's just my opinion. Whoever wants to go next.
I think that's right, just because, like, who else can? Turkey's the only regional power that's got the manpower to do it.
I wanted to add something about the idea of Trump making deal with another player, with a player or another one. I think to make a stable deal, you need some kind of stability in the area. Today, the situation is way too much chaotic to try to make this kind of deal. You have to wait to basically let the situation evolve and to understand which are the players, basically. Who they are, what they want, and what are the plans. Because today making a deal with someone is just too soon. And even if you want to make a P-Plague, the same thing.
The only question I have is the Kurds. And here's my guess. My guess is that the Americans have worked out some sort of deal to stay in the region and, more importantly, stay with the oil and the wheat that's in that region. But the whole argument has always been the Kurds are there, and it's the Americans who are supporting the Kurds, right? So what does that look like now? Does Erdogan allow a Kurdish state to be created in that area? Or I can't imagine him doing so, but what's the other alternative for the Kurdish people? Like, how does this play out for them long term? I'll throw that out to anybody.
Can I answer that? I think Erdogan's...
Yeah, go for it.
Kurds. I think the Kurds are done. I don't think Trump's going to do anything to help them. I could be wrong, but Toby, if you want to answer that.
Well, the thing is, like, the nature of a deal is that both sides compromise. So I can't see the Kurds disappearing altogether, right? Firstly, because there's too many of them, but secondly, as Nunya said, they're kind of like America's colony in that part of the world. That's been carved out of Iraq, that area of Kurdistan around Mosul. That's got a lot of oil as well. Trump's big on keeping the oil, which he says a lot. But the compromise is the Kurds want a port on the Mediterranean. The Kurds wanted Aleppo and Idlib. They wanted like a corridor there. And Erdogan has actually been on record recently as saying he wants Aleppo, he wants Idlib. So I think that the Kurds might have to suck in that they don't get their corridor to the Mediterranean, but they do get like an independent state. That could suit everybody too, because it would be like a buffer state in between Iran and Turkey. Because if Turkey takes over the whole of Syria, it's going to butt up against Iran, and Iran's got a very large Kurdish population that are actually like pretty well treated in Iran. And so if Turkey was to persecute the Kurds even more and eradicate them and from that area, that destabilizes the region. So if there is a deal, I can see it being along the lines of, create a Kurdistan, but Erdogan gets the coast. He gets the cities that he wants along the coast, and that's the compromise. But this is like, I don't know, like, who knows what deals they're making. I kind of hope so, because anything that brings peace to the region would be really wonderful, because those people have suffered enough.
Yeah, I think because it's a very interesting conundrum, because to me the HTS is backed by the Americans, and somewhat, and then you have the Kurds is also backed by the Americans. Turkey is also backed by the Americans because they're part of NATO. Everything is American related, but no one is playing ball with America right now, seemingly, except the Kurds, and because the Kurds have no choice. They chose this big brother, and they have to stick to it. And Turkey is like, no, we're not going to play your game. We're going to get what we want, and they went on the offensive. So, despite that, in Syria, Syrian Syria, they are like, oh, we are having peace. Finally democracy is, like freedom is here. The refugees are returning. But that is Western Syria. Eastern Syria is all Kurds. It's all SDF and all Rojava. And then you see the Turkish-backed military just continue to attack, and war is looming over there. It's fighting already. They're threatening to cross the Euphrates. It's like, it's two different worlds. It's two different Syria. And I'm not sure how the Americans are going to really make a deal. But I think that the Kurds, is in deep shit. It's like, they picked the wrong guy, to be the big brother.
Can I ask a stupid question? Can I ask a stupid question pertaining a little bit to what Toby said? Because I agree that, there are reasons to find that, as an issue, the thing that the Turkey and Iran might butt heads if they're getting too involved with the Kurds. But I wonder, what is the possibility that, because with Iran now being somewhat, and Israel for that matter as well, they're kind of cut off from each other a little bit, so their little spiel is maybe taking a pause for all we know. I've seeing some talks about the Israelis are more inclined to now go after nukes and whatever, so I'm not sure if anyone has any reports on that. But the question I have is, would the Iranians be would the Iranians be potentially one of the backers of the Kurds, considering that they have lost the Alawites now? So but they still want to be having influence in the region, and it's true they do have a sizable Kurdish population. So it didn't seem too unreasonable to me that maybe they choose to switch their position a little bit and say, we're still after Israel, but look at the poor Kurds. We want to protect those that we have Kurds. We want to, there any way they can spin it, right? This is how it works usually. But like we already alluded to, ethnicities and so forth, this can easily be used in a big grand geopolitical spiel. So, in that regard, what is the likelihood you guys think of Iran being one of the potential backers to the Kurds?
Well, there's two groups of Kurds, right? There's two groups of Kurds. There's a group that's always been backed by Iran, and then there's been a counter group that's always kind of worked with other powers, whether it's Turkey or America and so on and so forth. So I guess your question is how bellicose do Iran want to be? I don't see it. I don't see a great deal of bellicosity.
You are forgetting something. I'm sorry to cut you, but don't forget that in Iran there is also a Kurd problem. There is Kurd rebels in Iran, and they are fighting against Iran army and the Iran Republican Guard. They are killing policemen and so on.
Really?
Don't forget that. In Iran.
Where?
In
I understood that they were quite peaceful.
When you look at the border of the Kurdistan, when you look at the border of the historical Kurdistan, there is a part in Turkey, a part in Syria, a part in Iraq, and a part in Iran.
Yeah, I know there's a part in Iran, but where do you get this idea that there's conflict there? I understood there was no conflict. I understood that the Kurds in Iran actually got on quite well with the Iranian regime. I could be wrong.
No, they have some issue because they have received some help from the Iraqi Kurdistan. No, very sadly for the most of the country don't like the Kurdish minority because they want their own country. Most of the country don't want that.
I want to try. Can I just add to it? I've heard the same. What Shadowi is saying that they among the dissidents of Iran. So when we're talking about those in Iran who are against the Islamic Republic, they are also fiercely opposed to any secessionist movement, which that makes a lot of sense to me. Then, like, because what they want is a united Iran. They don't want that to be fractionalism or anything. They may have their discontent with the Islamic Republic, but they still want a united Iran. And so that's why it doesn't seem unreasonable to me. Like what the Shadowi is saying, the Kurds are quite disliked because you would have the secessionists will be edging on against the regime and the dissidents of the regime, right? So you can easily see how they become quite unpopular. I just want to throw that in there. I'm sorry, I'm sure I interrupted here.
Do you guys want to change topic to
Yeah,
something
please.
lighter? There is UFO and drones all over United States. Hell.
That's
Syria.